The May 18th meeting of Troy City. I'm Marty Baker, President of Council. Please silence your electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. Please stand, and we will begin with the invocation by Mr. Alan Clark, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please bow your heads. Eternal Father, please bless our city and all who live and visit here. Please give us understanding, patience, strength, and vision. Please give us, as city leaders, a greater vision and friends to support and encourage us. Bless all our city employees, including police, fire, and all members of the armed forces. Please remember the true meaning of Memorial Day is to honor those serving in our country's armed forces and have a safe weekend. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Oda? Here. Mr. Twist?
Here.
Mr. Heath?
Here.
Mr. Swazer?
Here.
Mr. Kendall?
Here.
Mrs. Snee? Here. Mr. Tremblay?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
Move to excuse Mr. Phillips.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Clark to excuse Mr. Phillips. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee? Yes. Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips is excused.
Tonight we have a public hearing. Mrs. Knight, please read ordinance 012, 2015.
Ordinance number 012, 2015, ordinance changing the zoning for a part of in-lot 9891 in the city of Troy, Ohio, from AR Agricultural Residential District to R3B Single Family Residential District. This is a parcel of 25.422 acres.
I now declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of the ordinance?
Hi, good evening. I'm Jessica Meinsinger with Nottingham Development, 7 South Plum Street here in Troy. We're requesting the rezoning of this 25 acres to R3B single family, minimum of 12,000 square foot lots. This is contiguous to the Nottingham Development, which is currently zoned R4. That's a minimum of 9,000 square foot lots, so these lots are larger. We're currently developing the final phase of Nottingham, so this makes a nice extension to finish out the subdivision. This would be developed eventually into 51 lots, so it's about 2 lots to the acre. Same covenants and restrictions as Nottingham, same price range, which runs between $300,000 and $400,000, including lots. The other nice thing, there are several other benefits of developing this as residential. We'll be able to make a connector to Troy Pickle Road, which is really going to be a great addition for the current residents of Nottingham, and also for fire and ambulance services and utility looping. And we're also able, with this addition to the subdivision, to facilitate the removal of the current lift pump station in Nottingham. So from a utilities and an ingress and egress standpoint, and really to add additional housing inventory to the market, it certainly makes sense for our development company, and we think it'll be a great addition to the city of Troy and the current Nottingham subdivision. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you.
Madam President.
Mr. Clark?
Mrs. Meinsinger, thank you. The other parcels are all sold out, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're developing the final 19 lots in Nottingham, and those lots have been sold to builders, and many of those have been pre-sold to homeowners. So yeah, there's definitely a need for that price range in the market, and there's very few places to build at this point.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of the ordinance?
I guess I'm Dan Dalton, I live at 612 Shaftesbury. I'm not in favor or against. My concern is, I talked to Tim Davis today, and he says, and I favor the road going out to Troy Pickle Road, and he says that does not necessarily have to be done until like the final plat. So if the final plat is going to go in 3 phases, so if the 3 phases would go, if only 2 go, then that road would never get built. I'm concerned about the heavy construction traffic that has to wind through the whole Nottingham, Shaftesbury all the time. If anything else, if we could put a construction road off of Troy Pickwa, it'd alleviate, they'd be probably ready for like 1,000 feet to that new development. I think that'd help a lot. And also in the paper, it says where Troy, or ban of Troy Pickwa Road, new intersection helps that traffic back there. I don't know how that happens. I mean, that has nothing to do with Nottingham back there. So I guess my concern is, I'm for development, and I think everybody should have a right to develop what they want, but I think there has to be a road to get back in there. Only one access is in front of my house on Shaftesbury, and if something would happen there, that could shut down that whole plat. And if high wires or something would go down, nobody could get back there, fire trucks or anything else. So I think it's something that has to be connected on there off of Troy Pickwa sooner than later.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Thank you. You have a comment or?
Yeah, just to remind council, this is only the rezoning. We have not seen the preliminary plans for any development. When we do, then we would discuss timing of the infrastructure. I tend to agree that we would need that road out to Troy Pickwa earlier than later, but that would be a discussion that we would have as staff and with the developer once plans are submitted, assuming that the rezoning is passed.
Yeah, well, maybe we can make note of it to keep it in mind when that time comes. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in favor of the ordinance? Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak against the ordinance? Okay, seeing none, then I declare the public hearing closed. Mrs. Knight, please read a summary of the minutes of the May 4th, 2015 meeting.
Minutes of council, May 4, 2015. Public hearing was held on ordinance number 011, 2015. Committee reports, there was the oral report regarding notice of 2 new liquor license applications. There were no resolutions. Ordinance number 011, 2015, a rezoning was given 3rd reading. Ordinance number 012, 2015, a rezoning was given 1st reading. Following comments, council adjourned at 7:21.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Move to accept the minutes as read.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Twist to approve the minutes. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Trembling?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
We'll move on to committee reports. All of our committees have been busy this week, and our first report is from the Community and Economic Development Committee and Chairman Mr. Bill Twist.
Thank you, Madam President. This committee met on May 12th to review a recommendation from the Troy Planning Commission that part of in-lot 6047, 14.577 acre parcel be rezoned from B2 General Business District to Planned Development. This parcel is located on Town Park Drive, which is part of the TIF district, and is generally located north of State Route 41 and east of Experiment Farm Road. The planned development zoning is based on the construction of a senior living facility that would offer several different levels of care, and the planned development zoning has protection that requires an applicant to resubmit to the Planning Commission and Council for approval of any deviations from the planned development plan. It is our recommendation, we support the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission that the requested rezoning be approved for part of in-lot 6047 on Town Park Drive from B2 General Business District to Planned Development. including the restrictions and covenants recommended by the Troy Planning Commission as contained in ordinance number 011-2015 and the exhibit attached here too. And that is respectfully submitted by Tom Kendall, John Swazer, and myself as chair, William Twist.
Are there any questions from council on the report? Thank you. The next report is from the Finance Committee, and Chairman, Mr. Tom Kendall.
Madam President, I've asked Mr. Tremblay if he would read that for me
Sure.
tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Tremblay?
Thank you, Madam President. On May 12th, the Finance Committee met to consider recommending that Troy be authorized to use the Nationwide Governmental Cooperative Purchasing Program, HGAC BUY. HGAC BUY is responsible for selecting competitive vendors for equipment and supplies used by governmental entities. Using these programs provides a savings to governmental entities related to the time required for specifications, preparation, bidding, and contracting. Utilizing HGAC BUY is an opportunity to broaden available vendors for items, especially as not all purchasing services bid and contract at the same time for the same items. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the City of Troy to make purchases through the Governmental Cooperative Purchasing Program known as HGAC BUY. We recommend emergency legislation as it was discussed that a demo fire rescue unit is currently available through HGAC BUY that would meet the needs of the Troy Fire Department and at a lesser cost than appropriated. This report is respectfully submitted by Mr. Swazer, myself, and Mr. Kendall as chair.
Are there any questions from council on the report? The next report is from the Law and Ordinance Committee, and Chairman, Mr. John Schweizer.
Yes, Madam President, we have one report. On May 4th, this committee met to consider the ratification of the Miami County Solid Waste Management Plan update. The Miami County Solid Waste District was established in 1989, and the Solid Waste Management Plan is updated approximately every 5 years to project procedures for the next 15 years in dealing with changing solid waste management issues. There has been no change to the core programs that were part of the prior approved plan, and there have been some enhancements. It is a recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared approving the Miami County Solid Waste Management Plan update, and this has been submitted by Mr. Phillips, Ms. Snee, and myself as chairman.
Are there any questions on this report? Thank you. Mr. Brockheath has the next report from the Recreation and Parks Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. This committee met on May 11th to consider recommending that the grant agreement be executed with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources for a $150,000 grant for the Treasure Island Improvement Project, and more specifically for the parking lot reconstruction. These funds were made available through HB 497. It is a recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to execute the ODNR Capital Improvement Project grant. That is respectfully submitted by Mrs. Oda, Mr. Tremblay, and myself as chair.
Are there any questions from council on this report? Thank you. The next report is from the Streets and Sidewalks Committee. In the absence of the chairman, Mr. Bobby Phillips, Mrs. Snee, can you present that report, please?
Thank you, Madam President. This committee met on May 12th to consider increasing the authorization for the Streetscape 3B project due to high bids. $575,000 was authorized for the project. Based on the low bid and allowing for contingency funds, the new authorization would be $650,000. The contract would be awarded to the low bidder, L.J. DeWeese Company Incorporated. Of the project costs, 47% or up to $300,000 will be funded by ODOT. We noted that while city costs for the project will be increasing, there is no increase to the assessments for this project as previously accepted by council. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into a contract with L.J. DeWeese Company Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $650,000 for the Streetscape 3B project, and that a contract must be completed in June to receive the ODOT funding for this project. Emergency legislation is supported. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Heath, myself, and Mr. Phillips as chair.
Are there any questions on this report?
I have a question, Madam President.
Mrs. Oda?
Patrick, I'm just wondering, at the time we authorize that money, is there a process that we go through to estimate how much a bid will be? I'm just wondering why we only authorized that much and the bid was higher.
Well, there were a couple of reasons. Number one, timing of the bid. Number two, there was some additional storm work that was just after design came out higher than we expected. We rely typically on outside engineers. When they come in, they design the project. They will give us an engineer's estimate so that we can go out to bid on it.
Yeah, it wasn't a huge difference. I just
No.
wondered why it is.
And,
there was
you know, we
difference.
have, we're usually conservative. I would say, I don't have an exact percentage, but it is an overwhelming majority of the time that we bid below the estimate. In this case, it didn't happen.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Finally, Mr. Doug Tremblay has a report from the Utilities Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Committee members Tremblay and Clark met on May 11th, 2015 to consider the request for bidding authorization for a replacement lime slaker system, including the installation costs. Initially, only the equipment was budgeted to replace one of the 4 lime slaker systems. However, it would be in the best interest of the city and the plant to have the supplier install the system. Funds are available from other budgetary savings to cover the cost of the installation. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for a lime slaker system for the water treatment plant, including installation costs, at a cost not to exceed $182,000. This is respectfully submitted by Mr. Clark, Mr. Twist, and myself as chair.
Are there any questions from council? We'll now open the meeting to citizen comments. There is a 2-minute time limit at this point in the meeting, and Mr. Livingston is our timekeeper. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments related to the agenda items this evening? If so, please come to the microphone and state your name and address. Seeing none, then we'll move on to resolutions and ask Mrs. Knight to read Resolution R22, 2015.
Resolution number R22, 2015, resolution authorizing the City of Troy, Ohio to participate in the Cooperative Purchasing Program of HGAC BUY and declaring an emergency. This is the first reading.
Are there any discussion from council on the resolution?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Clark to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Move for adoption.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R23, 2015.
Resolution number R23, 2015, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into a grant agreement with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, ODNR. This is for the funding of $150,000 towards the parking lot at Treasure Island. This is the first reading.
Are there any questions from council?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Tremblay and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes. Move for adoption.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R24, 2015.
Resolution number R24, 2015, resolution to adopt the solid waste management plan for the Miami County Solid Waste Management District. This is the update that's done approximately every 5 years. This is the first reading.
Is there any discussion from council?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Tremblay to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R25, 2015.
Resolution number R25, 2015, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into a contract with the L.J. DeWeese Company, Inc. for the Streetscape 3B project and declaring an emergency. This increases the authorization to $650,000 and does authorize a contract with the low bidder. First reading.
Is there any discussion from council?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Twist to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Heath to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Resolution R26, 2015.
Resolution number R26, 2015, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for a lime slaker unit for the water treatment plant, cost not to exceed $182,000. Authorization includes installation. First reading.
Is there any questions from council?
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Mr. Schweizer to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Move for adoption.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Kendall and seconded by Mr. Twist to adopt the resolution. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
We'll move on to ordinances and ask Mrs. Knight to read Ordinance 011, 2015.
Ordinance number 011, 2015, ordinance changing the zoning for part of in-lot 6047, parcel number D08056329, in the city of Troy, Ohio, from B2, General Business District, to a commercial plan development. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. It is a parcel of 14.577 acres located in the TIF district. This is the fourth reading.
Are there any questions from council?
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Schweizer and seconded by Mr. Clark to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, please read Ordinance 012, 2015.
Ordinance number 012, 2015, ordinance changing the zoning for part of in-lot 9891 in the city of Troy, Ohio, from AR, Agricultural Residential District, to R3B, Single Family Residence District. This is a parcel of 25.422 acres, has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. Had a public hearing this evening. This is the second reading.
And this will now go to committee for further
Yes,
discussion?
we will be setting a committee meeting in the next 2 weeks. I think Committee on Economic Development is who
Right.
assigned it.
Mhm. Thank you. That completes the business portion of tonight's meeting. Mrs. Knight, are there any communications or announcements?
No, they're not.
Mayor Beamish, do you have any comments this evening?
Just centered around Memorial Day. I appreciated the invocation that dealt with the Memorial Day as well, but we have our offices closed, but that doesn't mean that we will have residential trash and recycling that is going to be picked up as scheduled. So Monday pickup will be as Monday regular. And also the dye mill facility is open too. So that's something for everybody to know as you're making your plans. Also, being an optimist, I am very pleased to see or say that you're going to, and many of us are optimists, you'll start to see flags popping up around Memorial Day on Friday. There's over 400 now. It keeps growing in the patriotism that the community is showing. And that is a project that has been sponsored by the Optimist. There will be obviously a ceremony. There'll be a brief ceremony on the Adams Street Bridge, as always. And they'll move to the Veterans Memorial Park and Riverside Cemetery for the ceremony. The observance will take place 10:30. I will say that I will be out of town. But I've asked our veteran, Brock Heath, to step in and represent the city in his comments on behalf of the city. So we thank Brock for doing that and willing to do that. Hope everybody has a safe holiday.
Mayor, do you have a contact name for those Optimist flags in case?
Yes, Al Cappers.
Okay. Thank you.
If anybody wants to join in.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Titterington, any comments this evening?
Just one to report, and that's off the items of interest, and that is a fairly major shift in services, I think in a very positive way. As you'll recall, I believe last month, a couple of months maybe now, you authorized rebidding recycling services. We did open sealed bids, and Rumpke was awarded the bid for the next 3 years. That is a program that will change from the red bins to a toter system, 65-gallon toters. They will be on wheels. Those toters are on order, and the reason for that is that Rumpke will be able to use an automated system, using an automated truck, cutting down on their staff, making service and really curb appeal, I think, as well will be a lot better because the toters do have lids. The bid came in well under the maximum that you authorized per year, and so we're excited to see that happen. We look for that for a kind of a test, a pilot, if you will, in the event that we want to do that with the trash program, which, as you know, we provide in-house with our own staff. We expect that the toters are to be delivered and ready to go around July 1st. I'm not going to set a fine date yet or an exact date yet. We will be providing a lot of education, information between us and Rumpke well in advance of that to let people know what it is, how it'll work, what to do and what not to do. We will have questions, we know, and we'll deal with those as they come up. We do not anticipate any change to the schedule, so when people put it out will be the same as they do now. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Livingston, do you have any comments this evening?
Nothing this evening, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Stickle, any comments this evening?
I have no comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any council members have any comments this evening?
Madam President.
Mr. Clark?
Thank you. Again, I'll reiterate, please have a safe Memorial Day for everyone, especially if you're traveling. And I just wanted to share with others, I know the mayor was there today. My wife and I had lunch downtown at the Troy to listen to Prouty Plaza, to listen picnic on the plaza. And this will happen again on May 20th and May 21st. And it's the high school band, the junior high band, and the 7th grade band. And it was really nice music. It was a nice day out there, and there's no cost. And again, I think that's just another reason for people to come downtown Troy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members have any comments? Anyone from city staff have any comments this evening? Anyone in the audience have any comments? Thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. Have a safe and peace-filled week. Meeting adjourned.